evening. We're just about to make our way down to the Cowgate to start with formal proceedings. I've got two messages for people though. Firstly, please don't come into the Cowgate. We're going to take people on a virtual tour of James Connolly's Edinburgh, and we're going to bring James Connolly straight to you. So stay where you are, watch it through your phone or your computer. The second thing is, please share this, create a Facebook watch party on the 107 Cowgate Facebook page. Now, while we make our way down into Little Ireland, here's two songs, two good friends of the James Connolly Society. Firstly, Stevie Dodds with a Connolly classic, and then Kieran Davenport with one of Connolly's own numbers.
Oh, where is our James Connolly? Oh, where is that gallant man? Oh, he's gone to organise the union, the working men yet might be free. Oh, where is the citizen army? Oh, where are those fighting men? Oh, they've gone to join the great rebellion and break the bonds of slavery. And who'll be there to lead the van? Who'll be there to lead the van? Oh, who should be there but our brave James Connolly, the hero of the working man, who carries high that burning flag, who carries high that burning flag. 'Tis our James Connolly, all pale and wounded, who carries high that burning flag. They carried him up to the jail. They carried him up to the jail, and there they shot him one bright May morning, and quickly laid him in his grave. Who mourns now for our James Connolly? Who mourns for that fighting man? Oh, lay me down in yon green garden and make my biers Union men. We laid him down in yon green garden with Union men on every side, and we swore we'd make one mighty Union and fill that gallant man with pride. Now come all ye noble Irishmen, come join with me for liberty, and we will forge a mighty union and smash the bonds of slavery. Oh, where is our James Connolly? Oh, where is that gallant man? Well, he's gone to organize the union that working men yet might be free.
upward path are set where none may trend, save those who to the rich man's wrath they turn rebellious head. And heart is brave, no cringing slave in all her ranks appear. Her proudest boast and labour's host were freedom pioneers. Oh, slaves may beg and cowards whine, we scorn their foolish fears. Be this our plan to lead the van, we're freedom pioneers. Too long upon our choice we built the palaces of power. When at our touch those forts of guilt would crumble in an hour. Now each day brings them softest wings to their unwilling ears. Their shouts that greet our marching feet as freedom's pioneers. Oh, slaves may beg and cowards whine, we scorn their foolish fears. Be this our plan to lead the van with freedom's pioneers. The rich man's pride have held us long in awe. Our right to life is still denied and wealth still rules the law. But man shall bow no longer now, but welcome with his cheers the ringing stroke to break the yoke of freedom's pioneers. Oh, slaves may beg and cowards whine, we scorn their foolish fears. Be this our plan to lead the van with freedom pioneers. Oh, slaves may beg and cowards whine, we scorn their foolish fears. Be this our plan to lead the van with freedom's pioneers.
Welcome to the Cowgate, in the heart of Edinburgh's historic Old Town, birthplace of James Connolly and home of the James Connolly Society. And welcome to the 34th annual James Connolly Commemoration. Of course, this year the commemoration is going to be different. We're not able to gather here in the Cowgate to listen to songs and speeches about James Connolly's life and to celebrate that life collectively. Instead, wherever you are, we're going to bring James Connolly to you with a fantastic evening of song and stories about the great man James Connolly. And what better way to begin than a song about these very streets and James Connolly. So here's Paul Sheridan.
James Connolly's ghost remembers Connolly in his home of Edinburgh as a young man walking the streets and living life before he would move over to Ireland and to America. Well, I thought I saw James Connolly's ghost late last night, so I fall apart. The Stephen lost close, way disappeared out of sight. I searched around stone cobbled streets, but I never saw him more. So I took myself down the same stone steps James Connolly had walked before. I thought I heard James Connolly's voice in the meadows just last year. On still the nights, no other noise, but a sound so strong and clear. He called my name, I heard him speak, and his voice shook the branches of the trees. And it floated away into that midsummer's night, travel southward to the Swedes. You can talk in New York City, I remember well his Dublin deeds, but before the Hudson and the levee, James Connolly made the market leap. And Connolly's spirits lingers yet in every lane and street. of fiery speech. And when you hear the thunderclap, that's Connolly's voice that roared. Take a walk down the same stone steps where James Connolly had walked before. You can talk in New York City, I remember well his Dublin deeds, but before the Hudson and the Liffey, James Connolly made the mocking leap. Oh, oh, oh,
Fantastic way to start the evening. Now, we've took Paul's advice in the song. We've walked down the cobbled streets that James Connolly used to walk down here to the top of Kingstables Road, where at one time James Connolly and his family lived, and also where they worked at the council cleansing depot, which is just at the bottom of Kingstables Road here. And of course, after Connolly first left Edinburgh at a young age, having falsified that age and used a false name to join the British Army, he went to Ireland. And we asked historian Brian Hanley to tell us about that period in James Connolly's life.
Delighted to be able to take part in the Connolly events this year. It's sometimes forgotten that James Connolly was in Ireland for a period before he came here as a socialist organiser. In the 1880s, for a period of maybe 7 years, James Connolly served in Ireland as a British soldier. Now, around 1882, Connolly followed his brother John into the British Army. There's some confusion over which regiment he joined. It's often been argued it was the King's Liverpool Regiment. Others have recently suggested that it may have been one of the Scottish regiments. Certainly there was nothing unusual in an unskilled working class man in either Britain or Ireland joining the British military in that period, unfortunately. Thousands of Irish men joined the British Army in the 1880s and beyond, and they were usually sent to other parts of the empire, particularly India, to police the natives there. But in Connolly's case, he was sent as a soldier to Ireland. Again, as I'll explain, there's relatively little known about Connolly's time as a British soldier here. It's suggested that he was based for a period in Castlebar in County Mayo, in Cork, and also in the Curragh, which was the main British military base in Ireland, and then in Dublin for a period, either in the barracks, the Linen Hall barracks in Shipquay Street, or in Beggar's Bush, which was one of 7 British Army bases in Dublin in the 1880s. Some people suggest that he was in Belfast in 1886 during the violent anti-Home Rule riots there, and others have argued that while he was in Cork he helped guard the labourer Miles Joyce, who was sentenced to death and executed after being falsely accused of killing a landlord. Whatever the truth, we know Connolly was here for a period, and he was here during the 1880s when the key issue in Ireland was that of the land, when the Land League was waging a struggle against the landlord class, which was very violent, and which the British Army were often used to back up the Irish police, the Royal Irish Constabulary, in evictions and in dealing with hostile crowds and so on. It's interesting that in the 1890s, Connolly was particularly inspired by the writings of Fintan Lawler on the land question, and perhaps in the 1880s he experienced at first hand the condition of the Irish peasantry and the Irish labourers and small farmers. Certainly he would have seen in the 1880s that the British Army in Ireland was used to both police and control Ireland on behalf of the British ruling class. And I suppose what's interesting about Connolly's time in the British Army is that after he joined the army under a false name, underage, and he deserted sometime in the late 1880s. And he spoke very little, in fact, almost not at all, about his time in the British military. That's in contrast to someone like Michael Mallon, who's one of his comrades in the Irish Citizens' Army. Mallon wrote quite a bit about his time in the British Army in India. There were several other Citizens' Army activists and also members of the Irish Volunteers who'd been in the British Army too. But Connolly makes very, very little reference to it. In fact, he's exceptionally hostile to the British Army in his writings. Possibly the case again that he was afraid his enemies would use his military service against him. During the 1913 lockout, in an anti-union paper, there is an article arguing that Connolly was a British Army deserter. But certainly I think he in many ways was disgusted by the British military. I mean, he writes later on that the standing army in any country is a tool in the hands of the oppressors of the people and is a generator of prostitution. The British Army in this particular is the most odious on the face of the earth. He also again argues that the desire of the governing and oppressing classes to possess ready for use a body of highly disciplined men who on the first sign of the oppressed to get rid of their oppressors could be relied upon to proceed to destroying every man so aspiring to freedom. The army is in plain matter-of-fact language what socialists so blatantly describe it to be, viz. A body of hired assassins. So he's very hostile to the British military. He doesn't tend to reference the army at all in terms of his own experience, but I think his experience of being a soldier in Ireland probably was relevant to the ideas that Connolly developed. Only one positive really. While he's based in Dublin, he meets a young woman from County Wicklow, a domestic servant called Lily Reynolds, from a Protestant background as it happens, and they begin a relationship that ultimately leads to marriage when she returns with him to Scotland.
Hi, I'm Jerry Mulvena, and it's a great pleasure to be part of this celebration for James Connolly tonight. It's always a great honour to join with the James Connolly Society in the Cowgate in Edinburgh to sing my song The Footsteps of the Young James Connolly. This year I find myself in Belfast, sticking close to where my parents are during this pandemic. So I've had some time to make this new arrangement of the song for you tonight.
"100 years before I saw the light of morn, in Edinburgh's Cowgate, James Connolly was born. The streets of Little Ireland were his home for many years. From the Westport to St. Mary's Street, you feel him very near. Oh, how to walk in the footsteps of young James Connolly. Oh, how I love to walk in the footsteps of that great man. To Belfast he came to organise the union, the women and the men, the orange men and bishops. They were most terrified to see Catholic and Protestant marching side by side. Here's to his non-sectarian band, marching through Belfast for the union's demands. The fife and the drum scorn the old orange tricks and the ancient Hibernian stones and sticks. Oh, how I love to walk in the footsteps of young James Connolly. Oh, how I love to walk in the footsteps
footsteps of that great man. The national question was clearer in his mind. For an Irish republic, the workers must rise. Revolution was needed, reforms would never do, and the number of counties would be 32. Oh, how I love to walk in the footsteps of young James Connolly. Oh, how I love to walk in the footsteps of that great man. If you're walking through the Cowgate this dark and lonely night, remember young James Connolly, keep the flame alight. The social and the national is swam in both those streams, for a socialist republic of Ireland was his dream. Oh, how I love to walk in the footsteps of young James Connolly. Oh, how I love to walk in the footsteps of that great man.
Thank you, Jerry. That song, Footsteps of Young James Connolly, was something an anthem for the James Connolly Society back in the day, and it's wonderful to hear that new version of it produced by Jerry specifically for this commemoration. We're standing here just at the junction of South College Street and Lothian Street, two streets in which James Connolly lived at various points in his life. And while we're listening to Jerry's song, and throughout the night we're also going to be listening to some classic James Connolly songs performed, but we also want to listen to some of James Connolly's numbers, because as well as being a writer of history and political theory, of journalism, of plays, of short stories, James Connolly was also a songwriter. So now here is Kathy Carter to sing one of James Connolly's songs.
Whenever they speak, then we demand too much. 'Tis passing strange, and I declare such statements gave me mirth. For our demands most moderate, oh, we only want the earth. Be moderate, the trimmers cry who dread the tyrant's thunder. Too much, and people fly from you aghast in a wonder. 'Tis passing strange, for I declare such statements gave me mirth. For our demands most moderate, oh, we only want the earth. Our masters all godly crew whose hearts throb for the poor. Sympathies assure us too, if our demands were fewer. Most generous souls he believes the rank and file moderation teaches. Yet in despair we see the day when sword upon its girth, Labour shall march in war array to realize it's the earth. Labour long, sighs and tears, the weight oppressors knelt, never yet to save the fears in the heart of the tyrant melt. We need not kneel, our cause is high, our tune and there's no dearth, and our victorious rallying cry shall be, we walk the earth.
Thanks, Cathy, that was fantastic. We're here in the Meadows, somewhere James Connolly knew very well, the place where he cut his teeth as a public speaker and where he would often with his comrades come here to sell newspapers or just to impromptu give political speeches and organise people. Brian Hanley took us through James Connolly's period in the British Army, so we turned to Connolly's scholar, Chloe Alexander, and asked her to pick up the story of James Connolly's life from that point.
Connolly deserted back to Scotland in 1889, having served in the King's Liverpool Regiment. He had falsified his age at 14 in order to join. Unsurprisingly, Connolly remained very untalkative about his time in the army, and as a result, few facts are really known. In recent years, historians such as John Callow have sought to try and research exactly, where Connolly served during his time, but even still, there's a lot of speculation. What we do know for a fact is that Connolly definitely served in Ireland, and it was as a soldier in Dublin that he met his wife Lily. Connolly's time in the army definitely had a profound impact on him. For example, it left him with an extreme, distaste and disillusionment for the British military, the brutal aspects of British imperialism, and these are very obviously depicted in Connolly's later writings on the Boer War. However, on the other hand, Connolly's time in the military meant that he was familiar with firearms, and it also meant that he very much recognised the power and efficiency of an organised army. And this is evident later on in his writings, which are replete with reference to military technologies, military analogies, and also a lot of the time to rifles and bayonets, for example. From an early point in his return to Scotland, Connolly seems to have become immersed in socialist activism and in trade union circles. For example, in a letter to Lily in early 1890, Connolly wrote that, by the way, if we get married next week, for example, I shall be unable to go to Dundee as promised, as my fellow workmen in the job there are striking for a reduction in the hours of labour. And so this shows that even at a very early stage, Connolly was prepared to structure his personal life around his political activities. He was only 21 at this point, and so already he was very much emerging as a ringleader in terms of assisting in the preparations for a strike. In any case, Connolly did marry Lily Reynolds. She was an Irish Protestant from County Wicklow, and they were wed on the 20th of April 1890 in the Roman Catholic Church of St John in Perth. And by all accounts, in spite of the many hardships that the family faced throughout the years, especially in relation to Connolly's political activism, the marriage was very happy. The Edinburgh Labour movement and socialist scene, which Connolly came to serve his apprenticeship in, was a very bustling, very diverse, very international environment. For example, Connolly mixed with individuals such as Austrian André Chou and also the French immigrant Leo Mellier. Mellier in particular is a very interesting character. He was a political refugee who had been condemned to death owing to his prominent role in the 1871 Paris Commune, and he was instrumental in raising the city's prominence on the socialist scene. He assisted in the formation of the University Socialist Society and also in the organisation of May Day marches. Mellier certainly exerted a very strong influence on Connolly, especially on his attitude towards political violence and insurrection. If you look at the archives of Edinburgh Trades Council in the National Library of Scotland, when it comes to, for example, organising May Day marches, all the other officials there are very obedient in terms of thinking about, okay, which route are we going to take? What banners are we going to display? Melee, in terms of political violence, comes straight to the fore in terms of, okay, is there any shop fronts we can bomb? Can we use bombs? How can we make this march not just a non-violent march, but how can we also introduce some political violence in this? And so, although the vast majority of socialists in Edinburgh at this time, where Connolly was serving his socialist apprenticeship, very much envisaged the triumph of socialism through the ballot box, Melee, for example, was very notable in the sense that he favoured physical force. For example, in commemorating the Paris Commune in 1889, he argued that without the shedding of blood there can be no salvation. And this was a statement which Connolly later echoed in 1915, word for word. So this meant that, together with Connolly's time in the army, although Connolly initially very much pursued his political aims through the ballot box, physical force was always there in the background from the beginning. In terms of trade unions during his time in Edinburgh, Connolly was certainly very involved in organising, along with his brother John, especially in the Carters and also in the campaign for the 8-hour day. This was, of course, at the peak of New Unionism, which was the organisation of the unskilled and the previously poorly organised. However, Connolly was most active during this time through his membership of various political organisations. So, for example, by 1892, he was extremely active in the Scottish Socialist Federation. He was their secretary. And the organisation began to meet in the Connolly's Lothian Street home, which also became a meeting place for the local Independent Labour Party. And in the Independent Labour Party, Connolly succeeded John Leslie eventually as secretary. This highlights really the unity within Edinburgh's socialist scene, which distinguished it from many other centres of socialist development, especially in Scotland. Connolly was a member of not only the Scottish Socialist Federation, but he also organised within both the Social Democratic Federation and the Independent Labour Party. It's also important here to highlight the role of John Leslie, who had a very similar upbringing in Edinburgh's Little Ireland to Connolly. He assisted in the formation of an Edinburgh branch of the Scottish Social Democratic Federation, and he also grouped the Edinburgh Socialists into the local Scottish Socialist Federation, which Connolly became a member of. Leslie's political writings dealt frequently with the Irish national question, and they had a strong impact on Connolly, especially Leslie's 1894 pamphlet, The Present Position of the Irish Question. Here Leslie argued that Irish independence was only half the solution, and later on Connolly very much evoked this in his 1897 article, Socialism and Nationalism, where he basically echoed Leslie's statement that nationalism divorced from socialism would only recreate pre-existing social structures. He famously said, if you remove the English army tomorrow and hoist the green flag over Dublin Castle, unless you set about the organisation of the Socialist Republic, your efforts would be in vain. And we can also see a continuation of this further in Connolly's 1910 seminal Labour in Irish History. During his time in Edinburgh, Connolly also began to contribute articles and Scottish Socialist Federation branch reports to Justice, and these were his first known published writings. He also wrote for the spirited but short-lived Edinburgh Labour Chronicle. In terms of time constraints on this video, if I had to highlight one of Connolly's pieces, it would be his August 1893 political analysis. Here he contrasted aristocratic Edinburgh with nearby industrial Leith and queried the failure of Edinburgh socialists to establish a foothold there. Connolly described the city in very harsh terms. He said that Edinburgh was a city that was largely composed of snobs, flunkies, mashers, lawyers, students, middle-class pensioners and divided hunters. Even the working class portion of the population seems to imbibe the snobbish would-be bespectacled spirit of their betters, and look with aversion upon every movement running counter to their conventional ideas. Connolly also poured his commitment and organisational zeal into contesting elections. In the November 1894 municipal elections, he stood as a socialist candidate in St Giles ward, and with 263 votes, Connolly came third. The Liberal was victorious. Connolly, in his very mind, was defeated by the very people who ought to have backed him in his mind, in the sense that the very people he appealed to, largely the poverty-stricken, were often disenfranchised anyway. However, there was also the hindrance in the fact by the Irish immigrants tended to vote Liberal, owing to their popularity, owing to the popularity of the Irish National League, which encouraged people to vote Liberal because the Liberals had promised to make Irish Home Rule a reality. So as a result, Connolly was in this ironic situation where he was hampered by the Irish working classes in Scotland, because they were essentially prepared to vote against tyranny against themselves by not voting for socialist candidates who would have sought to improve their lot in their desire for long-term Irish Home Rule. And once again, this was highlighted in spring 1895 inaugural elections for the Poor Law authorities. Connolly once again stood as a socialist candidate, and here he only received 169 votes. And this affiliation to the Liberals by the Irish working classes in Scotland was a fierce obstacle to people like Connolly, who wanted to make working class political representation a reality. By 1895, Connolly's financial situation was becoming increasingly precarious. Lily was pregnant with their third child. He offered his services as a propagandist to the Social Democratic Federation and the Independent Labour Party, but he lacked the professional reputation of more high-profile socialists. The family situation was indeed so precarious that they even contemplated emigration to Chile. And their plight led John Leslie to make a special appeal for socialist employment for Connolly in justice. And Leslie wrote, "Connolly is the most able propagandist that Scotland has turned out. He's an unskilled labourer, a lifelong total abstainer, sound in wind and limb, married with a young family, and as his necessities are therefore very great, so he may be had cheap." Leslie's appeal was answered by the Socialists in Dublin, and in early May 1896, Connolly and his family moved to Dublin, where he would take up a full-time post as paid organiser for and as secretary of the Dublin Socialist Club.
Hi folks, my name is Kevin Gore. I'm an Edinburgh singer-songwriter, and I'm very honoured to be asked to be part of the celebration of the life and times of the great James Connolly. This is a song that I wrote called The Freedom Fighter. The very last verse is dedicated to the great man himself, but also talks about other freedom fighters, other personal heroes of mine. So here we go, The Freedom Fighter. First I saw the hooded men and the burning crosses. I was a boy back then. The white supremacists terrorized me. They hung my father from a sycamore tree. So yes, I took the violence, I lived by the sword. Was my way until I found my Lord. Malcolm X, Geronimo, the freedom fighter, Nelson Mandela, William Watts, James Connolly. Wherever there's injustice, there will always first they trespassed upon my land. My defense, I took a stance, placed my people in reservations to suffer death and disease, starvation. When they retreated, the blue coats broke. 300 braves, iron leather revolt. Malcolm X, Geronimo, freedom fighter, Nelson Mandela, William Wallace, James Connolly. And wherever there's injustice, there'll always be. Don't be confused, don't call me a terrorist, because I refuse to Yes, I drove them from my land with the unjust ways of their king's command. Long shine she said to vengeful force, 4 times our numbers and heavy horse. On Stirling Bridge he wrote to them as the river ran red as the blood of man. Malcolm X, Geronimo, the freedom fighter, Nelson Mandela, William Wallace, James Connolly. Wherever there's injustice, there'll always be me. With my comrades I rebelled. I was executed in Collingham jail. But a martyr I became. I lit the fire, I fueled the flame. For a people's struggle for liberation. Free the country for an occupation. Malcolm X, Geronimo, the freedom fighter, Nelson Mandela, William Wallace, James Connolly. Wherever there's injustice, Malcolm X, Geronimo, yes, Fatarama, Che Guevara, Nelson Mandela, William Wallace, James Connolly. And wherever there's injustice, there'll always be me. Always find you. You'll always have me.
Thank you, Kevin. An excellent song which correctly places James Connolly alongside other international revolutionaries. And before Kevin, we heard from Chloe Alexander telling us about James Connolly, who's just about to leave to return to Dublin. That was at the period of Connolly's life where his cobbler shop, which was situated just behind me on Buccleuch Street, had failed, and Connolly famously said he was going to buy a mirror to watch himself starve. This was one of the periods of Connolly's life, and there were many where he suffered incredible hardship. Unfortunately, during this pandemic, many other families are suffering hardship as well. So if you can, please donate to the 3 projects that we're supporting this year. One in Edinburgh, one in Dublin, and one in New York. The 3 cities that James Connolly called home. Details are on the bottom of how you can support those projects. Please, if you can, donate, and we'll help working class communities in Connolly's city today. We're now going to return to Brian Hanley, who's going to pick up the story of James Connolly's return to Dublin.
By 1896, Connolly had built up substantial experience in the Scottish Labour and Socialist movement. He was also the father of 3 children, and a feature of his life was that he always had to struggle to make a living. So his life is very precarious. And during 1896, his comrade John Leslie essentially pushed the labour movement and the socialist movement in Ireland to try and provide Connolly with some kind of work. The Dublin Socialist Club advertised in the pages of the newspaper Justice for an organiser to be paid £1 a week. Connolly applied, got the job and came to Dublin. Now, the socialist movement in Ireland was extremely small, extremely fragile. There was branches of the Independent Labour Party in Dublin and in Belfast, which the Dublin Socialist Club was affiliated to. It was looser groups of Fabian socialists and so on. But really the political scene was dominated by nationalism in the aftermath of splits within the Home Rule movement involving Parnell and so on. Most people still believed in some form of self-government within the British Empire. There was craft unions certainly, but the unskilled were largely unorganised, and socialism very, very fractured and weak. So Connolly begins activity in Dublin in difficult circumstances, and despite the promise of payment as an organiser, in reality he always has to work at other jobs as well to try and feed what becomes a growing family as he settles in the city. But it's really in Dublin that Connolly begins to grapple with this question of self-determination, of whether Ireland needs home rule, as most British socialists would have agreed, or something more, in fact independence. It's really, he begins to talk about the need for an Irish Republic, and he begins to read very deeply in Irish history. And over the next couple of years he publishes articles in Care Hardy's paper and also in the Shan Van Vocht, which is published in Belfast, and these are brought together in 1897 in a little pamphlet called Erin's Hope. Connolly here is drawn on the experience of Irish history, of the struggle of the Irish against imperialism, and he's becoming very much identified with the idea of anti-imperialism. That becomes very apparent later on, 1899, 1900, when Connolly's very, very involved in protests against the Boer War. The Boer War is a huge issue in Ireland. In fact, it's the Vietnam of its day. Thousands of Irish men fighting in the Crown forces in South Africa, but thousands of Irish people also very sympathetic to the Boers. Connolly forms alliances with people like Arthur Griffith and Maud Gonne, who he's possibly not very much in alignment with on other issues, but who all take part in protests against royal visits, against the Boer War. During that period, the socialist premises are raided and smashed up by the police. His newspapers are confiscated and so on. Now, by that point, the Dublin Socialist Club has become the Irish Socialist Republican Party. And again, we see this influence, I think, coming very much from Connolly. Other people involved include William O'Brien, who's a very significant figure in Irish Labour for the next 50 or 60 years, very closely aligned with Connolly in that period. And it's to O'Brien, to some extent, we owe a lot of the documentation of that period because he keeps very much of it. But Connolly, in very difficult circumstances, pushes the Irish Socialist Republican Party to take very much an anti-imperialist line. He gets a loan from Care Hardy in 1898, £50 to establish a newspaper, the Workers' Republic. That paper still repays reading today in terms of how Connolly seeks to link socialism to the question of independence, and also then how he brings news from across the world essentially to an Irish audience through the pages of the Workers' Republic. In 1898 was the centenary of the United Irish Uprising, so Connolly devotes quite a lot of attention to the lessons of the United Irishmen. He's influenced by those like Henry Joy McCracken, who said the rich always betrayed the poor, and Connolly tries to bring the class aspect to the fore in his writings, all the time trying to make a living, and also then trying to reach out and build the socialist movement across Ireland. Connolly also then, in this period as well, struggling to make sense of what's going on around him, whether or not trade unionism needs to change. He's experienced new unionism in Britain. In 1901 he becomes a member of Dublin Trades Council as a delegate from the United Labourers Union. Now, trade unionism in Dublin very much dominated by conservative craft unions by this point. Connolly arguing, even at this stage, for something different, for the organisation of the unskilled, bringing this message to a public audience with meetings on the Custom House steps by the River Liffey or in the Phoenix Park, often finding very hostile audiences. He's heckled because of his Scottish accent. He's told to go back to where he comes from, for example. He's not a fantastic public speaker, but nevertheless he's extremely determined. He responds when he's criticised for his alleged lack of Irishness, that he, like many others, is a product of how the British Empire has forced Irish people to leave their own country. So Connolly very often up against it in terms of his agitation, but a very dynamic and determined figure. And sometimes this upsets some of his comrades as well, because of course there are people who would rather that the Irish Socialist Republican Party remain a small debating club rather than an activist organisation. And Connolly falls out with a few of them in these years too, but he's pushing for activity all the time. In fact, he stands for election in 1902 and 1903 for Dublin City Council, which is dominated by this stage by the Home Rule Party. He doesn't succeed in being elected in 1902. One of his election leaflets, interestingly, is in Yiddish, and it's addressed to Jewish immigrant workers in South Inner City Dublin, and it's written for him by members of the Social Democratic Federation in the East End of London. Nevertheless, Connolly's unsuccessful, but he sees the need both for industrial activity and political activity.
Hi, how's it going, folks? My name's Conor Kelly. I sing with the band Glasnevin. I just want to say before I start, thanks to everyone who's invited me along to take part in this today. The birthday celebrations of the one and only James Connolly, a man who tried in his lifetime to bring everyone together, and is still doing so, 104 years after his death. The song that I'm going to sing is by a man called Eugene Poitier, and it is an international work in solidarity song. It's a song called Internationale. With arise, you workers from your slumber, and arise, all you prisoners of wants. For reason the revolt shall thunder, and alas, there's the age of cants. Well, away with all your superstition, servile masses, arise, arise. We'll change henceforth the old tradition, we'll spun the dust and the rise. So then, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. For the Internationale unites the human race. So then, comrades, come rally, and the last fight let us face. Well, the Internationale unites the human race. No more to live by the action, on tyrants only we'll wage war. The soldiers too will take action, they'll break their ranks, they'll fight no more. And if these generals keep on trying to sacrifice us to their pride, they soon shall hear the bullets flying. We'll shoot the generals on our own side. So then, comrades, come and rally, and the last fight let us face. For the Internationale unites the human race. So then, comrades, come and rally, and the last fight let us face. For the Internationale unites the human race. No saviour from on high delivers, no fame have we in prince or peer. Our own right hand the chains must shiver, chains of hatred, greed and fear. And their these will learn with their pity, and give to all the happier lots. Each at the forge must do their duty, we'll strike while the iron is hot. So then, comrades, come and rally, and the last fight let us face. For the Internationale unites the human race. So then, comrades, come and rally, and the last fight let us face. For the Internationale unites the human race. For the Internationale unites the human Thanks very much, folks. Up the workers and long live international solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Connor. Solidarity is exactly what it's all about. We're here at Carruthers Close, just on Edinburgh's High Street, and when Colin was a young boy, this is where the family moved to. And to continue the story moving along, we're now going to go to Luke McLaughlin, who's going to sing another one of James Connolly's songs, Lift the Flag.
Lift the flag and centrally guard it. Guard it as a lover will guard his love. Ours be the shame if fought departed, freely floating our ranks above. Raise the blaze of our hope and daring, all that the tyrants can do or say. The stripe and the fetters they long are weary, from the limbs of labour shall pass away. Guard the flag for brothers, 'tis ours, ours the lifeblood that gave it its hue. For us it waved through darkest stars, wait until labour its destiny knows. Hail the flag floating on high, free as the eagles fly to the sun, soaking its sign that men will die, for freedom persists till all is won. Raise the flag, brothers, your glasses, never wear drain to your holier souls. Never should time reveal as it passes a grander mission that labour can boast. Fill up your glass, no stinted measures, for same to dose this day with me, for the cause we love, the hope we treasure, the flag that beckons to liberty, the cause we love, the hope we treasure, the flag that beckons to liberty.
Thank you, Luke. And we're here in Blackfriars Street, where it's the street where John Leslie, who was mentioned earlier as James Connolly's mentor, who was a few years older than him. John Leslie lived here in this street. And just for people who don't know the local geography, the High Street is right behind me, and if we were to continue down here, that takes us back onto Cowgate. So tonight, we're celebrating James Connolly's whole life. In New York, where one of the projects are based that we are raising funds for tonight, was somewhere James Connolly called home for many years. So we turned to James Connolly expert Lachlan Collins and asked him to tell us about James Connolly in the United States.
James Connolly first went to the United States in 1902 when Daniel de Leon, who was the head of the Socialist Labour Party, invited him on a lecture tour. He was eager to have this renowned representative of the Irish working class visit, and the newspaper of the Socialist Labour Party often reprinted Connolly's articles. So de Leon was making sure that he kept Irish socialists in America happy and on his side. For Connolly and for the Irish Socialist Republican Party, the tour would prove to be of great benefit as he was able to sell subscriptions to the Workers' Republic newspaper. Now, his arrival in New York in September 1902 was of sufficient newsworthiness that the New York Times reported it under a heading, "Agitator Connolly Arrives," and he received a fairly rapturous welcome in the famous Cooper Union, where he spoke from the same podium that Abraham Lincoln had once spoken from. In his first lecture, he let the audience know that some of the Home Rule executive in Ireland were in fact slum landlords. He also stated that no person could be economically free unless they were politically free, and no person could be politically free unless they were economically free. His lectures received a tremendous applause, and the newspapers reported hats being thrown in the air. The lecture tour lasted 3.5 months and brought him all over the US. His lectures were reported on in the Socialist Labour Party newspaper, The People, and he sent heaps of money back to Ireland to help with the Workers' Republic newspaper. His letters home are quite a treasure. In one particular letter, he wrote about the weather. "It is fearfully hot for me, but the Americans say it is exceptionally cool. It is obvious to me that hell will be a far greater punishment to us than the Americans. Another great injustice to old Ireland." Now, Connolly could be very funny. At one of his lectures in October 1902, one heckler kept interrupting. At one stage, the heckler shouted, "You seem to know everything. Who will win the derby?" "A horse," replied Connolly, "but I'm surprised at an ass asking." Now, he arrived back in Ireland in the new year in 1903, but it transpired that in his absence, the party had opened up a licensed premises and had used the money he made in the US to make up certain shortfalls in the bar's takings. And Connolly was teetotal and really annoyed him. And he was especially livid because he had spent so much hard work over in the US trying to make a few bob, you know. And after a brief sojourn in Scotland as an organizer for the Socialist Labour Party in Scotland, he decided to emigrate back to the United States. Now, he had to borrow the money from his cousin Margaret Humes in Troy in New York. And the idea was that he would work and save and then bring the family over the following year. He also hoped that Daniel de Leon might employ him, perhaps as a writer for the People newspaper. However, relations between himself and de Leon had cooled by 1903. Perhaps de Leon knew that the party in Dublin was in disarray and that Connolly was no longer as important as he seemed in the previous years. Anyway, he managed to get a job for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, and in the meantime, he agitated for the Socialist Labour Party in his spare time. Around April 1904, de Leon published a letter by Connolly in the People newspaper under the title "Wages, Marriage and the Church," in which Connolly discussed the fact that some SLP speakers felt it was useless for socialists to demand higher wages, as this meant that the price of goods then rose. But Connolly's point was that the price of goods rose first and that wages then tended to increase in order to catch up. He also made some points that some SLP members were against monogamy and that there was an anti-religious stance which was driving some Catholic socialists from the movement. The letter caused a huge controversy and ended up lasting for years, and it created a major rift between Connolly and de Leon, which would never actually heal. Now, in August 1904, the rest of Connolly's family were due to come to the US, but a terrible tragedy occurred. On the day before that they were due to depart, Mona, his eldest daughter, was involved in a terrible accident in the house, and her clothes caught fire, and she received fatal burns. So Connolly was waiting for the family in Ellis Island, waiting for Lily and the 6 kids, and he must have received a terrible shock when an immigration official brought him to meet his family, who he hadn't seen for a whole year, only to be told that his eldest daughter, Mona, was dead. He described it as the blackest moment of his life, the worst aspect perhaps being that originally he intended to bring Mona with him to the US, but that there wasn't enough money for 2 tickets. The family anyway settled in Troy, which is known as Collar City, where most of the short collars in the US were produced. And work was initially quite plentiful. However, there was an economic downturn in 1905, and a lot of textile workers lost their jobs. And of course, they stopped paying their life insurance. So Connolly's job with MetLife went by the wayside. So he went to New York City and left the family in Troy. Now, in New York, with some of his old comrades from Ireland, they tramped around looking for work. And they used to try and find the cheapest places to eat for anywhere less than 10 cents. And Connolly gave all these places fanciful names like the Waldorf, because it was the complete opposite to that famous hotel. And one of the places he called Coffee with Onions, because it was usual to find a few bits of vegetables floating in your coffee mug. But he gave the occasional lecture for the SLP and eventually he managed to pass himself off as a lathe operator with the Singer sewing machine factory in Elizabeth. And eventually the whole family left Troy to move to 15th Avenue, New York, and things began to look up as he was earning $15 a week.
I've got a long job that I don't really like, and it pays my bills okay and gets me going on Friday night. Factories won't stay too long, so I keep my mouth shut. 'Cause if you mention organize, you know they'll nail the front door shut us down. Now work round here is hard to get, and I'm glad for what I got. But the robots need to build, but my labor is not. I stand upon this factory life and kills my hopes and steals my time. It's now in the place it gets like me. I'd rather know I fought the line than work my life upon my knees. It's now me. Woo! So if you're gonna rock the boat, first learn how to swim. Even if your boat goes down, you'll stay on top and still you'll win. The way I think is not a plan. We shall be paid for all our time. It's now we fight for your lives. If they don't pass the profits down, burn their factories to the ground. It's now we.
Brilliant. Thank you, Declan McLaughlin and Derry City. Before we return to Lorcan Collins to tell us about the rest of James Connolly's life in the United States, here's Chris Byrne in New York City.
How you doing, folks? My name's Chris Byrne, and it's an honor and a privilege to participate in this James Connolly commemoration. I'm going to do a song from my old band, Black 47, called, appropriately enough, James Connolly. Marching down O'Connell Street with the starry plough on high, there goes the citizen army with the fist raised in the sky. Leading them was a mighty man with a mad rage in his eye. My name it is James Connolly, and I didn't come here to die. No, I didn't come here to die, but to fight for the rights of the working man, the small farmer too. Protect public herring from the bosses and their screws. Hold on to your rifles, boys, don't give up the dream. A republic for the working class, economic liberty. Jim yells out, oh citizens, the system is a curse. An English boss is a monster and an Irish one even worse. They'll never lock us out again. Here's the reason why. My name it is James Connolly, and I didn't come here to die. No, I didn't come here to die, but to fight for the rights of the working man, the small farmer too. Protect public herring from the bosses and their screws. Hold on to your rifles, boys, don't give up the dream. A republic for the working class, economic liberty. Now we're in the GPO with the bullets whizzing by. McPirish and McDermott bidding each other goodbye. Up steps our citizen leader and he roars out to the sky. My name is James Connolly, and I didn't come here to die. Boys, I didn't come here to die, but to fight for the rights of the working man, the small farmer too. Protect public herring from the bosses and their screws. Hold on to your rifles, boys, don't give up the dream. A republic for the working class, economic liberty. We fought them to a standstill while the flames lit up the sky, till a bullet pierced our leader and we gave up the fight. They shot him in Kilmainham jail, but they'll never stop his cry. My name is James Connolly and I didn't come here to die. No, I didn't come here to die, but to fight for the rights of the working man, the small farmer too. Protect Poblochna Heron from the bosses and their screws. Hold on to your rifles, boys, don't give up the dream. A republic for the working class, economic liberty. Hold on to your rifles, boys, don't give up the dream. A republic for the working class, economic liberty.
Okay. Here at the James Connolly Memorial in Troy, New York. James Connolly lived in this city for over 2 years, and his wife Lily said that her stay in the house here in Troy was the happiest indeed in her lifetime. The children were stable at school, and James Connolly had a job. As all of you watching know, he went back to Ireland and died. He was shot in Kilmainham prison. And these words are the words of one of these British soldiers, a young man from Wales who was 19, and his feelings that were expressed by Liam McGowan. The man was all shot through that came today to the Barrack Square. A soldier I am not proud to say that we killed him there. They brought him from the prison hospital, and to see him in that chair, oh Christ, would call a man to prayer. Maybe I don't understand this thing that makes these rebels die, but all men love freedom and a spring clear in the sky. I wouldn't do this deed again, but all that I hold by as I gaze down my rifle at his breast, but then a soldier I. For they say he was different, kindly too, apart from all the rest, a lover of the poor, his wounds ill-dressed, he faces like a man who knew a greater pain than blows or bullets ere the war began. Died he in vain? Ready, present, and him just smiling. Christ, I felt my rifle shake. His wounds all open, around his chair a pool of blood, and I swear his lips set fire before my rifle shot that cursed lead, and I was picked to kill a man like that. James Connolly.
A great crowd that gathered outside of Kilmainham, their heads all uncovered, they knelt to the ground. For inside that grim prison lay a brave Irish soldier, his life for his country about to lay down. He went to his death like a true son of Ireland, the firing party he bravely did face. When the order rang out, present arms and fire, James Connolly fell into a ready-made grave. The black flag was hoisted, the cruel deed was over. Gone was the man who loved Ireland so well. There was many a sad heart in Dublin and mourning when they murdered James Connolly, the Irish rebel. God's curse on you, England, you cruel-hearted monster. Your deeds, they would shame all the devils in hell. shamrock still growing on the grave of James Connolly, the Irish rebel. Many years have gone by since the Irish rebellion, and the guns of Britannia they loudly did speak. And the bold IRA they stood shoulder to shoulder as the blood from their bodies flowed down Sackville Street. The forecourts of Dublin the English bombarded, their spirit of freedom they tried hard to quell. But above all the din came the cry, no surrender, was the voice of James Connolly, the Irish rebel.
Hiya, my name is Niall Connolly. I'm a songwriter from Cork, based in New York for the last 13 or 14 years, and I'm singing for you today with the birds in the background from upstate in the Catskill Mountains. About March or April of 2016 I got a call from the great Dublin singer Susan McKeown asking me to write a song and perform at Cooper's Union to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the execution of James Connolly. And I wrote this song inspired largely by an interview that I saw with Nora Connolly, and I wrote it from the perspective of James Connolly's daughter Nora and his wife Lily. The song is called May the 12th, 1916, song for James Connolly. I hope you like it. Thank you. Well, my father fought for justice, for our country to be free. He was my father first and foremost, and I sat on his knee. I remember his voice and the words he said to me. Before my father he went down in history. Said the mill owner to the factory girls, they'll be singing here no more. Well, the factory girls in unison, they walked on out the door. Do not tell us when to talk, do not tell us when to sing. As long as we have voices, our voices will be king. And Nora, don't you cry, Nora, don't you cry. I have lived the fullest of lives. Well, my father, he was wounded Easter 1916, stretchered by a boy of only 14. That boy, he tried to take the bullets meant for me. As long as we have boys like that, our country will be free. And Nora, don't you cry, Nora, don't you cry. I have lived the fullest of lives. At 1 a.m. on May the 12th, the message it was sent. The prisoner Connolly, his wife and eldest daughter does request Dublin under curfew, such a strange and sorry sight. Oh, Lily, you know that this means goodbye. But Lily, don't you cry, Lily, don't you cry. I have lived the fullest of lives. Said the nurse, I'm bound to search you, but I do not think I can. I see not prisoner, but virtuous, proud family man. There's little I can do now, do what I can. They carried my wounded father, tied him to his final chair. Said, Father Aloysius, for your killer, say a prayer. Well, my father fought for justice, for all workers to be free. He said, I pray for all men who must do their duty. And Lily, don't you cry, Lily, don't you cry. I have lived the fullest of lives. Said my father to the factory girls, your cause is just and right. It's a battle we won't win, but a battle we must fight. When you go back, hold your head high and sing your song out proud, that it might echo 100 years from now. And Lily, don't you cry, Lily, don't you cry. I have lived the fullest of lives. Oh, Lily, don't you cry, Lily, don't you cry. I have lived the fullest of lives. Oh, Lily, don't Lily, don't you cry. I have lived the fullest of lives. Oh, Lily, don't you cry. Lily, don't you cry. I have lived the fullest of lives. Gormargaret, thank you.
On to the rising, Mrs. O'Brien. You made breakfast for the leaders on Easter Sunday morning.
I did. I had that rare privilege, and I'll never forget it. They all came down to Liberty Hall. They didn't come all at once, you know. They came now and again. I think it was Tom McDermott came by himself, and so did Tom Clark. And you wouldn't know, suddenly one of them would erupt into the room. They all came by different ways, of course, they were all out in different places. But they just got the common, ordinary Irish breakfast of bacon and eggs, rashers and eggs and tea. But I can see them sitting in that little room in Liberty Hall, one or two. There was never more than two at the table, because only a small table.
MacDonagh, he used to joke you a lot, usn't he?
He was a very gay soul. I always felt, you know, that he lifted the atmosphere in any place up to a gay level. I don't know what it was about him, because he wasn't a big person, you know. He was rather slight, not tall, but I remember now when we were going away, you see, they were sending us back to the north with the dispatches from the council, Pierce and the others, and we were watching it. They wanted to get us out so that we would be back in the north by 12 o'clock. And 12 o'clock was the time they were going to start here in Dublin. So we were fussing and getting excited, and I remember him saying, fine lot you are, big strapping girls like you. He said, and all you're anxious to do is to get out of the city, and we're on the brink of a revolution. I can remember that so well. We were wakened up, it was about 1 o'clock at night, and the message that was given was that the prisoner, James Connolly, wanted to see his wife and eldest daughter. And Mama, Evan, it jumped to my mind immediately, you know, all had been executed up to then except himself, and Sean McDermott immediately jumped to my mind that he was going to be executed. But Mama had the idea that he wasn't well, that it had taken a turn for the worst. Anyway, we got ready and we went down. We were taken in an army lorry right through Dublin. It was an awfully queer, eerie trip, because we were staying in William O'Brien's house at that time, coming down through O'Connell Street, and all the still smelled burning, you know, they still got that horrible smell of burning, and not a soul on the streets, because there was curfew, you know, at that time. And you went through the dimly lit streets and not a soul. We didn't even see a soldier until we came to the bridge. There was some there. And we went up to the castle. I don't think I told you in the first visit, but every time we went there, we were searched. To see that we didn't bring anything in, I suppose, to help mend his life or something like that. But the last time we went up there, the nurse said, "I'm supposed to search you." But she said, "You give me your word, you have nothing that he can do away with himself with," he said, "and I won't search you." So Mama said, she said, "What do you think?" She said, "We would help him to die." So she didn't search us, but she pulled us away. She said, "Keep away," she said, "in case they might look just through the keyhole or open the door suddenly and they say I wasn't doing my job." So then after she kept us there for a while, and then she opened the door and she called us, says, "All right," and then as we went up. So when we got into my father, he said, "Well, Lily," he said, "I suppose you know what this means." I said, "Oh, no. Oh, no, not that." He said, "Yes, Lily." She broke down then and she said, "But your beautiful life, James," she said, "your beautiful life." And he said, "Wasn't it a full life, Lily, and isn't this a good end?" And she still cried, so he says, "Look, Lily, please don't cry." He says, "You'll unman me." So she tried to control herself. I was trying to control myself too. Then he said to me, "Put your hand down on the bed." So I put it down on the bed. And he said, "That's a copy of my statement to the court-martial. Try and get it out." So a piece of paper was folded up very tightly, not bigger than that. So I took it anyway. And we were there, I talked about little things. He was trying to plan our life for him after he was gone, and then they told us time was up and we'd have to go. He used to be shot at dawn, you see. So we couldn't get Mum away from the bed. The nurse had to come finally and help her away. And I went to the door, and then I went back to him. That was the last I saw him. But we went back in the morning, you know, to claim his body. We thought we'd have to put in the claim anyway. Of course, they wouldn't hear of it. But Mama had asked the nurse when she was helping her from the room, she says, "Get me a lock of his hair." And she did that.
Now, in the summer of 1905, a group of socialists and anarchists gathered together in Chicago, and they founded the Industrial Workers of the World, better known as the Wobblies. Their founders included Big Bill Haywood, Eugene Debs, the Cork woman Mary Harris, or better known as Mother Jones, Bill Troutman, Charles Moyer, the radical priest Father Haggerty, who railed against the lack of action within American Marxist organizations, calling them Socialists. But Big Bill Haywood of the Western Federation of Mine Workers said that he was going down into the gutter to get at the mass of the workers and bring them up to a decent plane of living. The badge of the IWW had the phrase "one big union," a phrase that the Irish Transport and General Workers Union would use later on. And their motto was "an injury to one is an injury to all." Needless to say, the IWW were popular with the unskilled labourers in America, and they attracted nearly 1.5 million members. But Frank Stenenberg, who was an anti-union former governor of Idaho, was killed in a bomb attack in 1906. And Big Bill Haywood and Charles Moyer were accused of the crime and arrested and jailed, awaiting trial. But James Connolly was on the Newark Haywood-Moyer Defence Committee, where he raised finance and organised protests for the two union leaders. As it transpired, the bombing was carried out by a fellow called Albert Horsley, and it transpired that a Pinkerton detective called McParland had encouraged Horsley to say that Haywood and Moyer had put him up to it, and which was not true. And the trial of the IWW leaders collapsed, and they were found not guilty. Anyway, it showed the depths the capitalists were willing to sink to destroy the IWW, and it helped to secure Connolly's position within that organisation in New York, where he was eventually appointed the New York organiser for the Wobblies. Now, George B. McLennan, the mayor of New York, said in 1907, there are Russian socialists, Jewish socialists, and German socialists, but thank God there are no Irish socialists. Well, Connolly decided to show the mayor that there were, and himself and some of his comrades, including the brilliant Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, they founded the Irish Socialist Federation. Connolly also founded a newspaper for the Federation, which he named The Harp. And the ISF grew to the extent that a branch was opened in Chicago later on as well. But The Harp didn't only champion Irish workers, he championed the cause of all workers. And he wrote that the vilification, discrimination, abuse, and ignominy, which was once the lot of the Irish, is now poured on the Italian, the Pole, the Hungarian, the Slav, and the Jew. So he's very much an internationalist in that respect. Now, some of his articles were even reprinted in the Gaelic American or Fenian newspaper run by John DeVoy. So he was certainly making a name for himself in the US. He also penned a heap of songs and collected them into a songbook. In the preface, he wrote, "No revolutionary movement is complete without its poetical expression." One of his songs has the beautiful refrain, "Our demands are most moderate. We only want the earth." And Connolly also threw his energies into a socialist history of Ireland, which became a classic, Labour in Irish History, when it was eventually published in 1910. Meanwhile, Connolly had been in touch with his old comrades in Ireland, like William O'Brien in Dublin, so he was able to get plenty of news from the old country and print that in The Harp as well. Now, in 1908, he severed links with the Socialist Labour Party and his old adversary, Daniel de Leon, and he threw his lot in with the IWW and with the Socialist Party of America. He undertook a brief tour of New York, selling subscriptions to The Harp, copies of his new songbook as well, and also spreading the gospel of the IWW and the Socialist Party of America. And at the Wobbly Convention in Chicago in 1908, Connolly had the good fortune to meet a man called Charles H. Kerr, who ran a socialist publishing house, which was owned by a collective of over 2,000 individuals and socialist clubs. And he agreed to print Connolly's collection of essays in 1909 under the title Socialism Made Easy. He then undertook an enormous national tour of the US on behalf of the Socialist Party, which lasted 11 months in total. So he was doing quite well, selling his book, selling his paper, and almost for the first time, he was beginning to make a few bob. But he was missing his family in New York, and he'd also badly missing Ireland as well. His correspondence with Bill O'Brien in Dublin, he speaks of how he'd love to come back home. And after much correspondence and long discussions with his wife, Lily, Connolly finally agreed to a proposal from Dublin that would see him return to Ireland for a lecture tour and officially as organiser for the Socialist Party of Ireland. And he left his wife and children in New York, and again, he set sail for Ireland in 1910.
Thanks, Lorcan. We're here in East Market Street, which is just at the bottom of Carruthers Close that I mentioned earlier, where Connolly lived as a kid. And at that time, the coast came further down because Jeffrey was the here, and it came right to East Market Street. And every morning as a kid, Connolly would have ran down through the dark, overcrowded close and come out into the light here. And the first thing he would have seen was this obelisk, the monument to the Scottish political martyrs, to Thomas Muir and his comrades. And of course, Thomas Muir, not only in the United Scotsmen, but a member of the United Irishmen and a incredible international revolutionary in his own right. And just next to that is also the the building that was Old Calton Jail, where John Maclean and his comrades were held for a period as political prisoners as well. But after talking about Connolly United States, let's return to Ireland. Here's Paul McAdam.
The song was written by James Connolly and was first published in the Socialist, May 1903. It became an anthem for the Citizen Army and also for the Connolly column who fought against Franco during the Spanish Anti-Fascist War, 1936 to 1939. It's called A Rebel Song. Come workers, sing a rebel song, a song of love and hate, of love unto the lowly and of hatred to the great who trod our fathers down, who steal our children's bread, whose hands of greed are stretched to rob the living and the dead. Then we'll sing a rebel song as we proudly march along to end the age-old tyranny that makes for human tears. And our march is nearer done with each setting of the sun, and the tyrant's might is passing with the passing of the years. We sing no more of wailing, no songs of sighs or tears. High are our hopes and stout our hearts, and banished all our fears. Our flag is raised above us, so that all the world might see. 'Tis labour's faith and labour's arm alone can labour free. Then we'll sing a rebel song as we proudly march along to end the age-old tyranny that makes for human tears. And our march is nearer done with each setting of the sun, and the tyrant's might is passing with the passing of the years. Out of the depths of misery we march with hearts aflame, with wrath against the rulers false who wreck our manhood's name. The serf who licks the tyrant's rod may bend forgiving knee. The slave who breaks his slavery's chain a wrathful man must be. Then we'll sing a rebel song as we proudly march along to end the age-old tyranny that makes for human tears. And our march is nearer done with each setting of the sun, and the tyrant's might is passing with the passing of the years. Our army marches onward, its face towards the dawn, and trust secure in that one thing the slave may lean upon, the might within the arm of him who, knowing freedom's worth, strikes hard to banish tyranny from off the face of earth. Then sing a rebel song as we proudly march along to end the age-old tyranny that makes for human tears. And our march is nearer done with each setting of the sun, and the tyrant's might is passing with the passing of the years. Every word still relevant today.
Thanks, Paul. A brilliant rendition of a brilliant song. And to continue in the same vein, here's Luke.
Oh, have I went to see the legends just the other night, that the Yankees after years and years in jail. His name was Nelson Mandela, and he came to tell his tale. Oh well, the crowd, they cheered him loudly, but then the silence fell. So spoke goodbye through our ears, the South African cell. Though he was free, his heart still felt the pain for his country and his people. Still both part of that shame. He said he hoped that we could join him and walk down freedom's path. That this would be the hardest road, it would be the last. So join our hands together so we might be as one. Bring the people to this cause, and this battle will be won. I went home to bed that evening, fell asleep and I had a dream. I was standing in the pouring rain in Irish fields of green. All around the headstones were the martyrs of the past. They stood in solemn silence and they spoke to me at last. Kevin Barry is my name. I was tortured in his cell. What are the names of my comrades? This I would not tell. And I am Roger Casement, sung in London South, for bringing those German rifles to the lonely Bannerstrand. Oh, James Connolly is my name. The working people are my life. They shot me down in Commemorative that strife. And I am Patrick Pearce. I was shot down by the foe when I read the proclamation on the steps of the GPO. Well, the last voice that I heard, he said, my name is Bobby Sands, and it's good to hear my sailor's word ringing through the land. Wanna hear it down in Belfast, side road. Maybe then those English soldiers will know it's time to go home. Well, I woke up the next morning, I remembered it all, and you would believe that they knocked on Berlin Wall. They said, oh Mandela, could this really be? Maybe now we'll see old Ireland reunited and free. Maybe now we'll see old Ireland reunited and free.
Thanks, Luke. And here for something special, here's Alan Quinn from Shubeen and Andy Nolan from the Bible Code Sundays.
Man was all shot through. It came today into the barrack square. And a soldier I'm not proud to say that, we killed him there. They brought him from the prison hospital to see him in that chair. I swear his smile would far more quickly call a man to prayer. Maybe I can understand the sting that makes these rebels die. But all men love freedom and a spring clear in the sky. I wouldn't do this deed again for all that I hold by as I gazed down my rifle at his breast. But then a soldier They say he was different, kindly too, apart from all the rest. A lover of the poor, his wounds ill-dressed. He faced us like a man who knew a greater pain than blows or bullets ere the world began. Died he in vain? Ready? Present? And him just smiling. Christ, I felt my rifle shake, his wounds all open, and round his chair was a pool of blood. I swear his lips is fire. But before my rifle shot that cursed lead, yet I was picked to kill a man like that. James Connolly.
Hello friends, how are you? My name is Donald Fallon. I'm delighted to have been asked to contribute to this celebration of the life of James Connolly. I'm a historian based in Dublin, a city that is very important to the story of James Connolly. I lecture on the Irish Revolution with the Lifelong Learning Department of University College Dublin, and I wrote a book called Revolutionary Dublin, a walking guide in which Connolly, and I suppose the citizen army more broadly speaking, an important bit of that story. To my mind, I think it's always important to make the point that James Connolly didn't invent socialism in Ireland, nor is the story of socialism in Ireland confined to James Connolly. And I don't think Connolly would want to be presented as some kind of godlike figure. We could do it then and we can't do it now. But I think he remains Ireland's foremost Marxist thinker and an inspiring figure who fused the red and the green, the causes of working class independence and national sovereignty in a way that was refreshingly new. Unfortunately, we can't commemorate Connolly in the way we normally would and would like to this year. I suppose the best tribute, the best commemoration of Connolly and his message of the rights of workers is to do whatever we can to support our frontline workers at the moment. So we're commemorating James Connolly from home this year, and I'm so grateful for the chance to be involved. I'm going to talk twice briefly, be glad to hear, firstly about Connolly's return to Ireland from the United States, and then about Connolly's involvement in the story of the 1916 Easter Rising. The Ireland that James Connolly came back to from the United States was in a very peculiar place politically. Home rule, limited Irish self-governance within the British Empire seemed to be an inevitability, despite the efforts of some loyalists to stop it. The battle cry in Ulster being that home rule is Rome rule. But as well as the home rule question, interesting things were happening in a different kind of unionism in Ireland, which was trade unionism. You had the emergence of the Irish Transport and General Workers Union, the ITGWU, established by Jim Larkin. I love that name, Irish Transport and General Workers Union. I mean, we know what a transport worker is, a bus driver, a tram driver, a train driver. A general worker, well, that's basically anyone and everyone. And the ITGWU was about just that, building a fighting union of the entire working class. Jim Larkin was many things, famously difficult to work alongside, egotistical. The joke was if you left Larkin in a room on his own for 5 minutes, 3 different organisations would emerge. But he did have a very strong sense of socialism, a very Christian influenced socialism that owed as much to the Bible as it did to Karl Marx. And Countess Markievicz remembered hearing Larkin speak very beautifully. She said he was not a man, but more some great primeval force. So the Ireland that Connolly came back to was swept by Larkinism. Larkinism swept Belfast and then Dublin, but Connolly became the leading figure of the ITGWU in Belfast. And I think his experience in Belfast as a union organiser really moulds his politics more broadly. One point they often make about Connolly is the enormous emphasis he put on the role of women and the liberation of women. Belfast was very different from Dublin in the sense that it had a female working class. The linen industry was enormous. Belfast was known as Linonopolis. Manchester and the neighbouring island was one of the great cities of the Industrial Revolution, Cottonopolis, and Belfast was Linenopolis. Connolly then is operating primarily in the northeast of Ireland as a union organiser, and things there are really, really heating up. Not only is Belfast a city with an industrial working class, it's also at the epicentre of the tensions that are building in Ireland around the question of home rule. He really tries to break down the sectarian divisions in the northeast of the country. He writes beautiful words. I think my favourite James Connolly quote: on the eve of the 12th of July in 1912, Connolly writes, "The orange fanatic and the capitalist-minded home ruler are alike in denying the truth. Before long, both of them will be but memories, while the army of those who believe in the truth will be marching and battling on its conquering way." Everything was changed, and changed utterly, by the events of 1913. In many ways, that changed the focus of Connolly's Irish life, if you will, post-America, from Belfast to Dublin. The union met its match in the form of William Martin Murphy, leading Dublin employer, self-professed Irish nationalist, who locked out anyone who worked for him who was a member of the Irish Citizen Army. William Martin Murphy didn't like the ITGWU because they used the sympathetic strike, but he didn't have any problem with the sympathetic lockout. And in many ways, he used the tactics of the union against it and really took it to the heart of the ITGWU. From the lockout emerged the Irish Citizen Army, a uniformed body of men and women, formed even before the Irish Volunteers, explicitly as a working class army to protect working class interests and to protect the union movement broadly. They would, in time, replace the hurley sticks that they carried with rifles. They wore beautiful Kelly green uniforms, slouched hats, and the red hand badge. The story behind the red hand badge is great. The union would change its badge every quarter to show that you had paid your dues to the 4 provinces of Ireland. But at the time of the 1913 lockout, it was the red hand badge of Ulster. So that stuck. That's ultimately the one that they would wear into battle in 1916. But 1916, that's the second part of our story.
Thanks, Donald. And before we get to that point in the evening, here's the Irish Brigade.
A large crowd had gathered outside of Commemorative, their heads all uncovered, they knelt all around. For inside that grim prison lay a brave Irish soldier, his life for his country about to lay down. And he went to his death like a true son of Ireland. The fiery party he bravely did face. Then the orders they rang out, present arms and fire. James Connolly fell into a ready-made grave.
Well, the black flag they hoisted, the cruel day was over, and gone was the man who loved Ireland so well. There was many a sad heart in Dublin that morning when they murdered James Connolly, the Irish rebel.
God's curse on New England, you cruel-hearted murderers. Your deeds, they would shame all the devils in hell. There are no flowers blooming, but the shamrock is still growing on the grave of James Connolly, the Irish rebel. Many years have rolled by since the Irish rebellion. The guns of Britannia, they loudly did speak, but the bold IRA, they stood shoulder to shoulder, and the blood from their bodies flowed down Sackville Street. The forecourts of Dublin, the English bombarded a spirit of freedom. They tried hard to quell, for above all the din rose a cry, no surrender, was the voice of James Connolly, the Irish rebel.
What a brilliant performance, the Connolly classic. And here's another one from Gary Lawler.
Okay folks, here's Connolly Was There, written by the great Dominic Bean, and the last verse added in by the one and only Christy Moore. Up the lily whites. Ah, there is a page in history where the workers they fought back, when the might of exploitation at the last began to crack. In farm and field and factory, in workshop, mine and mill, a flame is lit, a beacon bright, that flame is burning still. Connolly was there, Connolly was there, brave and undaunted, James Connolly was there. William Martin Murphy and his Dublin millionaires, they tried bribery, corruption, hypocrisy and prayers to break the transport union. Their scabs they did enlist, but all their graft was shattered by a scarlet iron fist. Connolly was there, Connolly was there, brave and undaunted, James Connolly was there. They executed Connolly in May 1916. United workers of the world, they still revere his name. In farm and field and factory, in workshop, mine and mill, that brazen light, that beacon bright, that flame is burning still. Connolly was there, Connolly was there, brave and undaunted, James Connolly was there. Connolly was there, Connolly was there, brave and undaunted, James Connolly was there. Connolly was there, Connolly was there, brave and undaunted, James Connolly was there. There you go, Connolly was there.
Thanks, Gary. And now we go back to Paul McAdam with one of his own songs.
I mentioned before I sang the last song, a rebel song written by James Connolly, that song had become an anthem for the Citizen Army and then for the Connolly column. But ever since they shot James Connolly on that bright May morning, he's still been with us. His legacy has lived on throughout our struggle. And I'm going to take you to 1981 now, and to a young man who was inspired by Connolly and who went on hunger strike and died as a result. His name was Kevin Lynch. And this song It's called The Hills of Dungiven, and it's written by myself. I was born in North Derry on the breast of the Glen Shin. As a young boy I would ramble through the fields and the glens, catching stickleback fish in the river and letting them go again. Often up to all kinds of devilments, having the crack, isn't that what life's about? I grew up with the love of football, the slither and hurl, and that's how I led my life until trouble unfurled. British soldiers came to Dungiven and attempted to beat us down into the ground, harassing us, stopping us, beating shade out of us, but we would not take this lying down. My comrades and I resisted ground forces, but in no time at all we were thrown into cells, beaten and tortured. I then was escorted to hell, and I found myself serving 10 years in a huge block cell. Oh, take me back to the hills of Dungiven, on the breast of the Glen Shin, where good people are living, and lay my body down in the place I call home. Wrap the starry plough around me, let my people take one final walk through the town with me, show the world the love for a Dungiven son, and let the whole world know what Britain has done. So here I am in this prison hospital, the young body battered, starving and weak. I've seen 6 of my comrades dying in agony, and the next one will surely be me. It's been an honor to have taken part. I've never felt so proud since I held the cup in Croke Park. Oh, take me back to the hills of Dungiven, on the breast of the Glen Shin, where good people are living, and lay my body down in the place I call home. Wrap the starry plough around me, let my people take one final walk through the town with me, show the world our love for a Dungiven son, and let the whole world know what Thatcher has done.
Thanks, Paul. What a brilliant, powerful song that is. And of course it's worth remembering that Francis Hughes died on hunger strike on May the 12th, 1981, the anniversary of James Connolly's execution in 1916. And to take us up to that point in his life, here's Donald Fallon.
So we've talked a little bit about Connolly's return to Ireland from the United States, the central role he would play in the Irish Transport and General Workers Union in the north, and then his return to Dublin with the 1913 lockout. The departure of Larkin for America after the defeat of the lockout is important to the story, because it leaves Connolly in a big way in charge of both the Citizen Army and the ITGWU union in Dublin. The strike, well, it wasn't a strike, workers go on strike. A lockout is what the employers do. The lockout was international news in its day. When Larkin arrived in the United States, J. Edgar Hoover, one of the founders of the FBI, would refer to Larkin as one of the most dangerous men in the United States. So that was nothing if not a compliment, and it gives you a sense of just how internationally significant that moment had been. So Connolly, post-Larkin, if you will, takes charge of Liberty Hall. One thing he has in common with Larkin is the way he sees Liberty Hall as a great big project. I mean, the Manchester Guardian wrote about Liberty Hall during the dispute. No Labour headquarters in Europe has contributed so valuably to the brightening of the lives of the hard-driven workers around it as in Liberty Hall. It's a hive of social life. It was that, but as the drums of the labour movement were replaced by the drums of war on the continent, it became something else entirely. The First World War, the war to end all wars, or so they claimed, did, I suppose, somewhat take people by surprise. The belief of the labour movement and the socialist movement in Europe was that when a war like this came, the workers would refuse to fight in it. And unfortunately, as we know, that's not exactly what happened. Rosa Luxemburg in Germany would dismiss a lot of the left in Europe as the shield bearers of imperialism. You know, people who said that they were against the World War in theory, but when it happened, rallied behind their own respective national armies. And Connolly is in a real minority of socialists. Rosa Luxemburg, Vladimir Lenin, and others who stood defiantly against the war. The idea that the Irish Citizen Army and the Irish Volunteers were very, very different organisations is something I would challenge. I mean, the Volunteers were a very broad force, and ultimately they were about one thing, which was Irish national sovereignty. But even in their ranks, there were quite a lot of trade unionists, people like Padder Mackin, who lose their lives in the Easter Rising. And the coming together of the Citizen Army and the Irish Volunteers is I think quite a natural political relationship. There's enough in common between these organisations, and I think you see that reflected in the 1916 proclamation. It's the broad vision of a broad revolutionary movement. Connolly, we know, is sometimes accused of abandoning his socialism by partaking in the 1916 Rising. But I think when you read the very last editions of his newspaper, The Workers' Republic, you get a real sense that even right to the bitter end, Connolly has maintained the same political approach. We are out for Ireland, for the Irish, but who are the Irish? Not the rack-renting slum landlord, he tells us. We also know that on the eve of the Rising, he gathers the Citizen Army in Liberty Hall, and he tells them, in the event of victory, boys, hold on to your rifles. Those with whom we're fighting may stop before our ultimate aim is achieved. Now, I always wondered about that quote. Where's the fact that he said this? Years later, we discovered that Seamus Robinson, a member of the Irish Citizen Army in the 1930s, writing his memoir, recalled Connolly saying those inspiring words to the ICA. So he maintains this sharp sense of socialism right up into the moment of battle. Revenge is a sweet thing. They got it on Easter Monday 1916 as the revolutionary forces took over the centre of Dublin. The flag of the Irish Citizen Army, the Starry Plough, was raised on O'Connell Street over the Imperial Hotel, owned by, you guessed it, William Martin Murphy, the great opponent in the 1913 lockout. Most of the Irish Citizen Army fought on the south side of Dublin, at St. Stephen's Green and in its environs, and at City Hall. The first casualty on the rebel side, the first fatality of the Rising, was Sean Connolly, a member of the ICA, killed at City Hall. Connolly, by comparison, was on the other side of the river at the GPO. Also in the GPO was Roddy Connolly, his son, just 15 years of age at the time of the Rising, and in a few short years he would meet Vladimir Lenin, who professed his great admiration for Roddy's dad, James Connolly. Connolly led by example during the Rising. He went out onto the streets of Dublin, he inspected the rebel barricades. He was actually shot while inspecting a barricade near to the GPO. And going into the Rising, he had led the way, really, in terms of teaching both the Citizen Army and the Volunteers, how do you build a barricade? How do you mouse hole? How do you move through buildings and the like? So the military planning of the insurrection, in many ways, came from the great James Connolly. His execution, to my mind, is tragic for a number of reasons. One, the fact he's shot tight to a chair, so badly wounded during the insurrection. But two, it happens on the 12th of May, so late after the other executions, the executions of people like Patrick Pearse, John McBride and others, and when public feeling had already turned against the idea of executing the rebel leaders. I think it says something about who regarded James Connolly as a threat. The Irish Independent newspaper, for example, had called for his execution. So I think they understood that while the Rising itself had lit something in Irish people, a sense that they were entitled to national independence, Connolly stood for more than that. And I think his legacy is the fire he put into the hearts of Irish workers.
Thanks, Donald. And that brings us to the end of James Connolly's life. And here we are at St Patrick's in the Cowgate, where he was baptised. But of course, Connolly might have been executed on May the 12th, 1916 by a British Army firing squad, but he lives on. Wherever working class people are struggling, Connolly lives on. And here's Ian Prowse with another song about another revolutionary who endures to this day.
Here's a song I wrote about the most famous member of the Guevara Lynch clan. I'm going to sing this for the enduring memory and inspiration of James Connolly. The heart right out of the arcade. Some people say there ain't nothing worth such destruction, yeah. But how many times you gonna get up after you have been hit? I did it for love. 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 Do you know I did it for love? We lost 7 men in a raid on a radio station. We failed to meet our objectives on that sorry night. American agents are mixing in with the people. The CIA know the city is legitimate. I said the CIA know the city is legitimate. I did it for love. I did it for love. Woo! I did it for love. I did it for love. I did it for love. Conscience intact. Everything I own is in this bag on my back. Hungry, dirty, don't ever sleep. Been tapping your phone lines all night for a week. Disguises and visas, passports and guns. A crucifix wrapped round my left hand for luck. Rendezvous points for the glorious day. And a fever that won't go away. I did it for love. Woo! I did it for love. 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 Say, John, vamos.
Brilliant, Ian. Thank you. We're here in Chambers Street, literally surrounded by history. James Connolly, places where he had meetings, flats where he lived, a whole load of history within a stone's throw here. Book an Edinburgh Detours will tell you all about it because we're running out of time. And because time is short, here's 2 songs. One for Paul Sheridan and one for Declan McLaughlin.
Hi, this next song is a song that I've kind of written for this project. And it's taken from the writings of Connolly himself, and it's to look at how he felt that this
the change that had to happen was the change to the economic system. I have no working title for it just now, but we'll get some.
Empires crumble and tyrannies perish. Servitude we still remain. We must organise our class to meet our masters. It's time to smash that ball and chain. Locking came in the years before me to untie that stranglehold of our system designed to rob us and cast it aside when we get old. I saw starving, deprivation, exploitation at first hand from profit grinding men who use us in the robber clutch upon the land. The walker slave of capitalism, the female walker, the slave of the slave. Let's we break the shackles of this system that drives our children to an early grave. Can we talk of Ireland Day? Freedom's down in chorus. If we replace the crown with the bourgeoisie, then the masters still reign over us. Those who robbed our fathers down, stole our children's bread, whose hand is out, the wretch to rob, living and dead. Empires crumble and tyrannies perish. Servitude we still remain. We must organise our class to meet our masters. It's time to smash our master chains.
Rise up, see we've achieved, standing on the shoulders of the ones who dared believe. Rise up and see how far we've come, that the laughter of our children in our days finally come. Cherish all the children, remember those we've lost, our sisters and our brothers who paid the highest cost. We must build a future to the glory of their name, on the island and its people, for their freedom once again. I know we're strong, but we must be stronger for the road we're on. Together we're stronger. Rise up and let them hear your voice, that those who hold the chains, they no longer have a choice. For we have known the darkness of that cold and lonely road, of those who stood against us as we made our way back home. And from its highest mountain to the valleys to the sea, let the future of this island be Republican and free. Rise up, it's now we will be heard, and proudly we will stand among the nations of the world. Rise up,
you, Declan. What a fantastic song, which really embraces Connolly's ethos of Let Us Rise. And I would just like to say, as we approach the end of this evening's commemoration, that how brilliant it is to see all of these wonderful, talented people contributing to tonight's event. And it reminds us that while these events are taking place, James Connolly and his politics, they live. So thank everybody who's took part as we approach the finale here. This, in the heart of Edinburgh's Old Town, Little Island, the streets that James Connolly lived in, longer than he lived anywhere else. It has been wonderful, even during this pandemic, to be able to celebrate James Connolly's life. So now, to end tonight's proceedings, someone who needs no introduction at all, but I'm going to give him one anyway, the one and only Damien Dempsey.
If every classroom around the world done a study or a project on the great man James Connolly, I think in 10 years' time the world would be a better, fairer place. But he was a feminist. You know, the Irish volunteers in 1916, you know, they didn't take women. They were a very Catholic organisation, you know. But the Irish Citizen Army welcomed women with open arms, you know. And my aunt Jenny Shanahan, she joined in 1914 with Rosie Hackett. They were great pals. They both came from the tenements, you know, from one-room tenements. And here's a picture of the two of them there. Jenny is third from the left back row and Rosie Hackett is fifth from the left. And they're all, after getting out of prison there, the ladies, you know. And warrior women. But on Easter Monday morning in 1916, James handed all the women revolvers before they went out to take on the most powerful empire the world had ever known. And they never saw James again. But they heard, when they were in Kilmainham, they heard him being shot, you know. So anyway, grammar to all the Edinburgh Connellyites. God bless you. And maybe someday I'd love to come over and maybe you can show me where James was from. And we'll have a song and a few stories and a chat, you know, about the great man. And anyway, I'll give you a verse or two. Where, oh, where is our James Connolly? Where, oh, where is that gallant man? He is gone for to organize the union and smash the bonds of slavery. They buried him in yon green garden with the Union men on every side, and they swore they would forge a mighty weapon. At James Connolly's name would live again with pride. Where, oh, where is our James he's here. Where, oh, where is that gallant man? He is gone to join the great rebellion that working people, they might yet be free. Grammar, comrades, slan.
What a fantastic ending to a fantastic evening of James Connolly. And Demo, once this pandemic finishes, once travel's possible, consider yourself invited to Connolly City. We'll walk Connolly streets and we'll tell those stories and sing those songs. It's probably better for everybody if you sing the songs. All that's left for me to do is to thank everyone. I want to thank all the musicians, the singer-songwriters, the historians, who have made a fantastic effort to put this together tonight. They probably thought it was mad at the beginning, but I really appreciate all their help. And also I want to thank Kevin Brannigan and Michael Dixon, who've been my co-conspirators in this project. They've put in an awful lot of work over the last few weeks to make sure that this happened, and I really appreciate it. And to everybody watching, I want to thank you all. And next year, for the 35th annual James Connolly Commemoration, you are all invited here to the Cowgate to celebrate the life of the great James Connolly. Thank you.